Hey everybody, welcome to Classics You Slept Through, the podcast where we read classic books and talk about them with you. My name's Kyle Davis, and today I'm here with a girl who doesn't mind a tumble as long as there's plenty of dirt on the road. My sister, Meredith. How's it going today, Mer?
It's going pretty good. Things are good. The baby is 1 month
Excellent.
old today on this recording.
Oh, wow.
Did you know that?
That is positively ancient. Does she have her own podcast yet?
She does. It's all about gurgles and spit up and the best direction to poop.
Excellent. Down. Always down. That's always the best direction.
And you've been out and about traveling.
I have. So this is Classics You Slept Through on the road. We're taking this nationwide. I have been for the past week and a half or so. I've been traveling maybe 2 weeks. I don't really know. Time has no meaning anymore. But I drove from the East Coast all the way to the Pacific Northwest. I went to Alaska for a few days of hiking, and now I am slowly making my way back east. And it's been interesting. I've put over 4,000 miles so far on the car, and I have a few thousand more to go.
Wow.
Yeah, this has been a delayed. This was supposed to be my sort of present to myself post-retirement, but with obviously COVID lockdowns and whatnot in the time frame that I could do it, wasn't really feasible. So now that things are, obviously not back to normal, but we have reached some sort of manageable equilibrium with this pandemic, or at least we're fooling ourselves into thinking we've reached some sort of manageable equilibrium. I decided, you know what, this is about the best time I could ever do it. So I'm going to do it. And that's what I've been doing.
And you did most of this in a car, not a gig? You didn't take the gig this time?
I did not take the gig, although even though my horse can reach 10 miles an hour, I don't want to think about how many days it would take me to go 4,000 miles.
Oh my God. Be like
I guess, well, depends how many hours a day I go, I guess.
I'm sure John Thorpe would get there before you, though, had you gone at the same time.
He definitely would, because he has a firm hand on the reins, which that segues us nicely into what we're talking about today. We've got Northanger Abbey, chapters 9 through 13, and this is kind of where the book sort of takes off. Last week when we were discussing the beginning, we arrived in Bath, we kind of got into the rhythm of life there, going to pump room and balls and the upper rooms and the lower rooms and, sort of the things that we do while you're recovering from gout. But today we sort of hit our stride, and we've got some drama, we've got some action, things are happening in these chapters.
We've got some narcissistic tendencies, got some over-exaggeration.
Are there really any other kinds?
It's just a delight.
And we talked last week a little bit about how our characters in this book, I think this being a less mature Jane Austen writing this,
right?
Our characters aren't as well fleshed out, and I think they continue to sort of be stereotypical cardboard cutouts, but I think they come into a little bit more relief in these chapters.
Yeah, I think we're going to see that with Catherine mostly throughout the book. I think, as we should, she's our quote unquote heroine. And I think these experiences, especially some of the ones that happen in these upcoming chapters, really help to shape her maturity in her social interactions, and with the recognizing what's going on with the people around her. That's my prediction, at least. I have not finished the book, but that's my prediction is going to happen to our heroine as she grows.
Right. I haven't finished it either. I'm hoping that we get some kind of growth and actually some kind of personality out of poor old Catherine.
Aw, Cat.
But these chapters, I think we really get into a little foreshadowing with where these characters are going. So with that, why don't we get into it a little bit here?
Yeah, let's talk about chapter 9.
Sure. So chapter 9 kicks off with John Thorpe, Isabella, and James showing up at Catherine's place, which, just thinking about it just now, where is James staying? Is he staying with Isabella and John Thorpe? because he's not staying at with Catherine and the Allens.
Right. I was under the impression that James and John have a room together. I'm not sure if they're with the family.
Okay.
That was my
I just thought it
impression.
kind of strange that, her brother shows up and he's not staying with the rooms that they've kind of, her quote-unquote family is already gotten.
Yeah, well, seeing him was a surprise. Remember, they were just crossing busy Pulteney Street, and James and John are there. What a surprise!
Right.
She had no idea that they would be coming. I wonder if Isabella knew.
Exactly.
She seems to always be in cahoots with her brother, and Catherine's on the outskirts. Anyway, chapter 9.
Anyway, so chapter 9. So, the Scooby Gang shows up, and John runs upstairs and tells Catherine, hey, remember that drive we were going to take? Let's go. Catherine's kind of surprised, taken aback, asks our very well fleshed out character of Mrs. Allen what she should do. And, Mrs. Allen just kind of, whatever you want to do.
Just as you please.
And Catherine, as we've seen, who has kind of no opinion on her own, she goes, okay, well, fine. Well, if Mrs. Allen says it's cool, then I'm going to go. So they go out, and immediately we get John. This chapter 9 is really John's chapter. So we got two carriages. John and Catherine are going to take the one in the front, and Isabella and James are just sort of decoration in the back. We don't really get much out of them this chapter. But John kicks it off by telling Catherine, hey, look, my horse is good if he just takes off, if he just goes, don't worry, he'll settle down. Don't be scared. And of course, this immediately frightens her because I guess being in a carriage when a horse takes off is absolutely chilling.
That could be dangerous. There's no airbags or a seatbelt. She could just fall out and get run over by the back wheel, and then she's...
Yeah, I suppose it would be a little dangerous.
Yeah, she could have 2 broken legs, and then who's going to dance with her at the pump room? No one.
Right. With broken legs. That would actually solve some of her problems. Well, turns out, John being John, the horse just starts walking naturally, and Catherine's not afraid at all, and all of John's boasting was for naught. But of course, as John tells her, it's all because of the way he handles the reins.
Right.
That's why the horse was fine.
The horse probably hates him so much. He's like, I'm going to walk as slow as I possibly can. I just want you to get out.
Right. I would almost like to see these books written from, the perspective of the servants, because as, the guy brought the horse up with John, and then John's like, all right, we're going to go when he gets in. And sort of ignores these people that are standing around helping him. But anyway. So now I think we hit the foreshadowing point. So John starts probing Catherine about the Allens, asking how rich old Mr. Allen is, and saying, well, he doesn't have any children, does he? No heirs, no sons, and questioning Catherine about, whether or not, he's her godfather. So I'm thinking John is angling, his interest in Catherine is purely financial, and he's angling to, try to get in on some of the Allen's money when Mr. Allen passes.
I like that he says, is your godfather? No, he's not my godfather, but you're always with them, right? She's like, yeah, very much. He's like, that's what I meant. He's a good kind of fellow, and has lived very well in his time, I dare say. He's not gouty for nothing. Like,
he's not gouty for nothing.
Is it money that makes you gouty, or stress in life? Like, what makes you gouty? At least in this context, I guess it makes me think of, like, he doesn't have gray hair for nothing. He's worked hard or something.
Right.
He's not gouty for
nothing.
A
lot of rich eating, I think. A lot of isn't it fatty and salty foods? Isn't that what does it?
I don't know.
I had a coworker who had gout, and he could only have like a beer once in a while.
Oh yeah.
And like a salty meat, I think, flared up his gout. So he had to really watch his diet to manage his gout. I think burgers, he couldn't have a burger or something because that would do something with his gout.
I get gout and goiter
Anyway.
confused. Every time I think of gout, I picture like a big neck goiter, and then I have to correct myself that that's not what gout is.
No, gout's like inflammation in the legs, I think.
Oh.
I think that's what it does. That's
All
what
right.
it ends up manifesting as.
Doesn't sound enjoyable.
So they kind of carry on here. And so now John starts talking about his carriage. Or more specifically, he starts talking about James's carriage. And so we've got sort of two things wrapped up in this. First is his, obvious boasting as he's talking about how bad their carriage is, and it's going to fall apart any second, which of course has the effect of frightening Catherine again, and she's now worried for her brother and Isabella, which immediately flips John into, it's fine. If you know what you're doing, you can drive this thing forever. And we get the statement about Catherine not understanding a person who is going to assert two different things. Because in her life, she has never encountered someone who pumps himself up and, she's never met a braggart, I suppose.
Right. She takes people at face value. She believes what they say. So the first thing they say, she's like, that's their truth. And then now she's met John, who says back to back opposite things in a single conversation.
Exactly. Catherine comes from plain spoken people. Her dad, he'll take a pun every once in a while. Don't want to get too crazy. Her mom, she's satisfied just with a proverb. So they definitely aren't pumping themselves up with false speak.
They also sound like a lot of fun.
Wild nights at the Moreland place, right?
I think Catherine would after her conversations with John Thorpe, she'd do well in 2020. I think we're all a little used to the equal and opposite speech. John Thorpe is a man before his years, or before his time.
She would not understand. Yeah, John would probably be a good politician nowadays.
Yeah.
Or not a good politician, but he would at least be a successful one.
Yeah. Great. No wonder I hate John so much. Anyway,
so that's kind of the carriage ride. So they come home, and she gets a bit of a... She I think at this point, Catherine, she had, as Mrs. Allen describes it, a nice airing and sort of enjoyed her day. But then she finds out that Mrs. Allen, who has returned from, and I love the phrase, all the busy idleness of the morning. You don't really do a whole lot. You do a whole lot that doesn't amount to much in Bath, I guess.
It's vacation.
But she's gone down to the pump room. Yeah, it's leisure. You're busy at leisure. But Mrs. Allen has gone down to the pump room, and she has run into the Tilneys. And not just the Tilneys, but the whole Tilney family.
Yeah, sister, father, son. At least one son.
Well, is there a mother and father? Mrs. Allen doesn't quite know. They may be dead. They may have been there.
Are Mr. and Mrs. Tilney in Bath? Yes, I fancy they are, but I'm not quite certain. Upon my recollection, however, I have a notion they're both dead. Well, at least the mother is.
Might be dead.
Yes, I'm sure Mrs. Tilney is dead.
So any conversation with Mrs. Allen is quite useful.
She only realizes she's dead because there was a very beautiful set of pearls that Mr. Drummond gave his daughter on her wedding day that Miss Tilney has now got. So I guess Drummond is Tilney's maiden name?
That's her, yes. That's Mrs. Tilney's, the mother. That's her maiden name. She was a Drummond before she was a Tilney.
All right. And now she's dead because her pearls are on her daughter's neck.
Correct. So this, unfortunately, completely flips Catherine's opinion of the day. She now, definitely has some FOMO. She wanted to go to the pump room. She wished she saw the Tilneys instead of riding with the Thorpes. And so now she has decided that the carriage ride was perfectly dreadful and that John Thorpe is kind of a disagreeable fellow.
Yes, quite disagreeable. I find interesting John Thorpe talking about his gig and his horse and his carriage and how much better it is, blah, 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 blah. long before cars existed, it seems like men were talking about how wonderful their modes of transportation were. And it made me think of that.
Yes.
It made me think of the Queen song, I'm in love with my car, which is an absurd song to begin with. But
yes.
What did they do before they had gigs and horses and carriages? Were they like, my feet? My shoes? My path? I've got the best shoes.
I mean, we've been driving horses and carts since, gosh, the Middle Ages. I mean, you think about, the Romans and, before times, thousands of years ago, had chariots. And I suppose you looked at your chariot and how nice it was.
Now, for some reason, that makes more sense to me than a carriage. I don't know why. Maybe because of the popularization or the media portrayal, movie portrayal of chariot races, and like in cartoons where like saws and spikes and flames come out of chariots.
Well, they were vehicles of war mostly. So,
yeah.
The aristocracy probably would have had them. Maybe your palanquin. You talked about how great your slaves were that were carrying your palanquin around.
What's a palanquin? Like
it's the thing. It's the chair you lounge on, and you got the 4 beefy dudes on each corner.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe that's what you did. You compared those when you visited your distant cousins in the other countries or whatever.
All right, fair enough. So he's in love with his gig.
Right, he's in love with his gig. So the other two quick things from this chapter that I also had continue with John's foreshadowing when he's talking about John's carriage that he's gotten, which I guess he's basically a rental. He makes a comment to Catherine to the effect that John should keep a good carriage of his own. And Catherine said, well, why would he ever do that? He can't afford something like that. And John makes the comment about how people who are swimming in money shouldn't act miserly. So he has got it in his head that even the Morlands are rich. So he's definitely money obsessed. And most of his conversation seems to center around money.
So is
selling and buying.
So does that mean his family is less well off? Because I thought they were just as well off as everybody else, if not more so. But does that mean
I'm wondering if this is going to be our, sort of the quote unquote scandal of the book. If we find out that the Thorpes aren't well off, and that's, that they're just doing the whole keeping up appearances thing.
Interesting.
I don't know. We'll see. That's my working theory right now. The other thing that we'll see, we have, I think, our first appearance of Isabella's 1,000 things, that she has thousands and thousands upon things that she needs to talk over with Catherine, and then just kind of doesn't. So she does it in this chapter. She'll do it again coming up when they hit the theater.
Isabella's the best example of the worst kind of friend.
She absolutely is. She's terrible. I'm not a fan of Isabella.
No.
But James seems smitten. All right, so that takes us to chapter 10. And so now we start off. This one's got a lot going on, so a lot of action for our characters. So it starts off with a little vignette in the theater. They go, because that's what you do in Bath. You go to the theater if you're not going to a ball. And they go up to their box, and, Catherine's kind of looking around for the Tilneys, doesn't really see them. Isabella shows up with James and immediately goes into her, oh, my dearest Catherine, I've got 1,000 things I need to tell you. And she theatrically turns to James and says, James, I'm not going to talk to you all night. I'm going to talk to my dearest friend Catherine, so you just have to get over it. And then she goes into, what a great time we had, Catherine, I'm glad you weren't there because you would have teased me and you would have, made some comment about how perfect James and I seemed for each other and just how wonderful everything is. And, which Catherine obviously protests. No, I would never think of such a thing. And Isabella just smirks. And I love how she puts it, that she then doesn't speak to her the rest of the evening. So those 1,000 things, they're burning.
Mm-hmm.
None of them come out.
Isabel's such a dick. She's like, you would have made some droll remark. She's like, no, I wouldn't. Yes, you would. I know you better than you know yourself. What?
Yes.
What a dick.
They barely spent, 2 weeks with each other?
I know, they just met. They literally just met.
Right, and they only see each other, maybe a little bit at the pump room, and then, because as we've seen after the carriage ride, 3 p.m., whoa, I can't come in. It's way too late. We're done for the day. We're going home.
Yeah. My first note on chapter 10 is Isabella is dreadful. That's it. That's my first
The whole
note.
Thorpe family. Absolutely terrible. So that kind of is the theater. But then the rest of chapter 10, we go into the ball. And so now she sees Tilney's there, and she's very desirous of avoiding John. Actively avoiding him.
She just want to get roped into having to dance with him again.
Right. She doesn't want to do that. But she does dance with Tilney, which is nice. And they have a fun conversation where they spar over Tilney's opinion of a dance partner.
Mm-hmm.
The inciting... Yeah. I guess the inciting incident for the conversation is John Thorpe does come... Does John come over right now? And then Tilney's like, who are you talking to?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So John pops by while Tilney's doing, I guess you dance a little bit and then you go break off and you come back together for a dance. I'm not sure how these 1800s dances work exactly. But John comes over, and this is actually one of my favorite John things. He says, who's that guy you were talking to? Is that Tilney or whatever? And so Catherine says, yes, that's Mr. Tilney. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's a fine-looking guy. Do you think he needs to buy a horse? I got this friend who has a horse. I could sell him. And
Sam Fletcher.
Immediately.
Good.
Yeah. So he immediately leaps into trying to sell a horse, trying to get some money. That's actually, I loved John in this chapter. He was actually a great character right there.
Yeah.
But then Tilney comes back, and he's a little upset. Upset is a strong word. He very flirtily and playfully starts teasing Catherine over, why were you talking to some other guy? When I dance with a girl, I consider that to be like marriage. It's a commitment. And Catherine's really not having this.
Fidelity and complacence are the principal duties of both. Of dancing with someone and of marriage, I guess. Ridiculous.
Right. And Catherine immediately, comes into, that's silly. Marriage, you can't possibly think that. Marriage is completely different from just dancing for an evening with someone. But Tilly lays out, I think, a pretty good argument. I was convinced by the end of it.
You're convinced. Well, then what's the point of going to a dance if you can't dance with a lot of people? Or you can't dance with who you like?
I don't know. Did they dance with a lot of people? It seems like you get engaged, like somebody asks you to the dance and you're engaged to them for that evening to dance.
I don't know.
Or at least that's how Catherine's been handling it.
But she was only engaged. She was engaged to John for 2 dances, because at the end of the previous chapter, she's like, no, you've had your 2 dances. Or at the end of the previous ball or whatever. You've had your 2 dances and I'm done.
But then, in this chapter, he says, well, I asked you to dance as soon as I came in. What are you talking about?
Maybe we should look that up.
They have an argument over that.
We need an expert.
We do. I mean, this is obviously pre-dance cards of the, 40s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, where you signed up people to dance, and you figured out who you were dancing with that evening.
Yeah.
You scheduled it, which I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit better than, well, did you ask me? And I'm stuck with you all night. I said yes.
Yeah, that sounds dreadful. Especially if it's someone like John.
It does.
And it doesn't, and I guess you can refuse, but refusing to dance seems like it would be a blow to the person who's asking.
Well, as Mr. Tilney explains, in both marriage and dancing, the woman has the right of refusal, and that's her only power.
Because she can't ask someone to the dance, and she can't ask someone to be married. And as we learned at the beginning of the book, you can't even be in love with someone until they're in love with you first. So like
Well, you can't dream about someone. Yeah. It would be scandalous to have a dream about someone unless they've told you that they've dreamt of you first. So.
These poor women spending their lives in like, did I do something wrong? Feeling shamed all the time because you can't control your own brain.
Right. Well, I mean, in the days where you couldn't work, your entire, once you reached, 21 or something, you were then an old maid. And, I think, wasn't at the beginning of Sense and Sensibility. I think they're lamenting their old age of 21. They're not married yet. Something like that.
My God.
So yeah, you had no prospects. If someone didn't marry you, you were on your own, and especially if you didn't come from a family with money. If your father or your brother couldn't take care of you, I mean, I would imagine being a woman in that situation would be quite frightening.
I feel like that's only let up in relatively recent history. I mean, even the 50s and 60s, if you weren't married, I mean, that's part of I feel like the feminist debate versus I don't know what you would call non-feminists.
Right. I mean, but at least, it was obviously not great conditions and not equal, but at least back then a single woman could get a job. I mean, they could be a teacher I don't even know. I mean, in the 1800s, are women working as teachers?
I think so.
That scandalous even then, I think.
No, I think they were teachers or they could be governesses and like be basically an au pair of sorts and educate, a child. And I think they'd probably take in, I don't know, washing and sewing and
maybe that's what the older unmarried women did. You just became a governess, and that's how you supported yourself if you weren't married.
Could be. And then isn't it well, it's Jane Eyre, which isn't by Jane Austen, but Jane Eyre, she's the governess and falls in love with Mr. Rochester. Is it Mr. Rochester? Oh, I'm showing I feel like
you got me on that one.
It's pregnancy brain. You forget everything. No words. I'm not even pregnant anymore. It's new mom brain. That's what it is.
Still hormonal. It'll take you a few weeks to settle out.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing, people.
Exactly. No, it really is. All right, so they kind of finish their conversation. This chapter ends where we meet Tilney's father. So she sees a guy. This is, the men in this book, the older men, are kind of creepy, if you ask me. But she sees this guy eyeing her from across the room, and Tilney's talking to him, and she says, "Oh, handsome-looking guy," even, for this older dude who's got to be at least. Well, they married early, so maybe he's only in his 40s. I mean, who knows? Maybe 50s at the most, because he says he's still maybe past the bloom, but still in the vigor of life. So he's not decrepit yet.
No, I feel like men get really good in their 40s, right?
Well, thank you. We're gonna go with that. I like that.
Ben just turned 40. Men like hit a prime in their 40s if they let it. I guess if they let it happen. I guess you could get decrepit at any age, really. You
definitely could. My back is trying to get me there, so we'll see. But anyway, she meets General Tilney. They all have a good opinion of each other, and she goes away very much impressed with the Tilney family. Well, this is also where she meets Miss Tilney, right? And they talk about, Catherine says that she hasn't gotten to walk anywhere yet while in Bath. And Miss Tilney, oh, I know all the great places to walk. I'll show you around or whatever. And they kind of make plans to walk the next day. Mm-hmm. Now, provided it doesn't rain, which Catherine, of course, it's not going to rain. It's not going to rain.
And it rains.
Yeah. But that gets us into 11. Do you have anything else for chapter 10 before we move on?
I do. There's a quote that I wrote down that I really, I just really like it. It said, Miss Tilney met her with great civility, returned her advances with equal goodwill, and they continued talking together as long as both parties remained in the room. And though in all probability not an observation was made, nor an expression used by either which had not been made and used by some thousands of times before, under that roof in every Bath season, yet, and this is the part I like, yet the merit of their being spoken with simplicity and truth and without personal conceit might be something uncommon. So they're having... Miss Tilney and Catherine are having general small talk. How's the weather? How long you've been here? What have you been doing? Who are you with? Boring small talk. that everybody has had thousands of times in that same context, but they're having it with legitimate desire to have it, concern for one another, an interest in getting to know one another. And as someone who used to, in my teenage years, be really grumpy and just cynical about small talk, I think that's a really great observation about the difference between the two, like getting to know someone and having the small talk versus just having trite small talk for no reason, which I feel like is what an example of Isabella would be versus Tilney. Miss Tilney has more depth and is likely, we'll see, a better friend to Catherine in the long run, or would be. And I just really like that that comparison and that quote about basically small talk with someone new.
Right, and it's also a callback to her original meeting with Tilney in the beginning of the book, because they do the same thing. When Tilney first meets her and he's obviously interested, they're chatting, and then he, says, "Oh, my apologies, I haven't gone through the normal questions. How do you like Bath? How are you finding it? And so they kind of playfully go through that small talk, and that endears her to Tilney at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So the Tilneys are more interesting than the Thorpes and the Allens at this point.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, than any other character that we've met. Everyone else is very shallow and vapid at this point.
Right. Well, let's talk about Chapter 11.
Chapter 11. So this is... I was going to try to make some joke about how John is morally bankrupt. But anyway, so Chapter 11 starts off with Catherine very excited to get to go for a walk. She's basically a puppy, right? And unfortunately, it does rain. So it rains up to the appointed noon when the Tilneys were supposed to come by. But unfortunately, as the rain breaks, John and the gang show up, and they're ready to go for a ride. John's got to get that carriage going again.
Yeah, and they're going somewhere exciting. At least they tell her they're going to be, because she's like, "No, I don't want to go. I can't go." And they're like, "But we're going to go to Blaise Castle." She's like, "Wait, what?"
Yes. A broken down Gothic castle. I mean, how much more romantic can that be?
Right? She's like, "Can we go all over it? In every tower and in every room?" She's so excited.
So now she's excited. But she's only agreeing to go because John says, "Oh, that guy you were talking to last night. Yeah, no, I totally saw him riding out with someone else." And she's like, "Well, maybe they're going to come back for me." No. I heard him shout to another carriage driver. They were driving all the way up to, wherever. They're going a long way today. So, and she just...
What a quick liar.
Interesting that, well, not only that, but just given everything she knows about John Thorpe, she just goes, "Oh, really? You saw him?" And he's going, "Oh, okay, yeah, fine, then I'll go with you."
Yeah, come on, Kat. How could that? That's so convenient. No, I saw him, and I even heard where he was going, and you're free and clear, and you could come with us.
Exactly.
She has no skepticism whatsoever about John Thorpe.
Not at all.
Not yet, anyway.
Right. Well, they get into the carriage, and they take off, and unfortunately this is where I called him in my notes Problematic John, because this... And I was cringe. It was a hard cringe reading this stuff here, with modern eyes. They actually pass the Tilneys, and Catherine turns around and she sees the Tilneys turn, and they kind of lock eyes. So they know that each other has seen each other.
Yeah.
As the Tilneys are coming to pick her up for this walk, and she immediately begins begging John to stop or to turn around, and man, he just keeps on trucking.
Basically, he's kidnapped her at this point, right?
Yes.
She's like, let me out.
Yes.
And he's like, no. It was very cringy, scary, even.
It extremely was. Extremely.
And Isabella's like, "Oh, who's that girl who's basically giving you the evil eye right now? Who's that girl staring you down?" She's like, "Oh my God, it's the people I really want to be with and should be with."
Right.
Instant regret. I can't even, the dread, that sinking feeling that I felt in my chest reading this when she realizes it's all been a lie, and the internal clamoring to want to get out of the carriage. There was one time where I got into a car with a friend of mine, and I was like, yeah, I'll go with you. And instantly I realized it was going to be a terrible trip, and I was going to regret every moment of it, but I was stuck in his car, and we had already started driving, and I just wanted to claw at the windows and get out. Not that he was a bad person or mean or anything, but I was like, this is going to be an just emotional disaster of a trip. Why have I agreed to this? I've made a terrible mistake. And that's exactly what I felt for Kat in this situation.
Oh, it's so bad. So, I mean, she yells at him. She says, pray, stop, Mr. Thorpe. I cannot go on. I will not go on. I must go back to Miss Tilney. Says, but Mr. Thorpe only laughed, smacked his whip, encouraged his horse, made odd noises, and drove on. So he's just harumphing and, giggling to himself that he's kidnapping this girl.
And I think they're all in the same carriage at this point, right? They're not just in the two separate ones, because Isabella said to her, who's that, as they're driving away, right? So why is no one helping her?
Are they in two?
Maybe they were driving side by side, but
no, they're in two, because as they were within view of the town of Keynsham, when a hello from Moreland, who was behind them, made his friend pull up. So James and Isabella are in the carriage behind, and that's how Catherine ends up getting out of this. James is like, you know what, man, it's kind of late. We should probably just go back.
Yeah. All right. So Isabella must have just called to her.
Yeah, like, hey, I noticed that girl staring at you. What's going on?
Which, if she has to call to Catherine in the front carriage, I wonder if the Tilneys heard her. Which would be even worse.
I thought. Like, at what point? Why did Catherine not just shout? I mean, I guess that's just not done, or that's rude. But why didn't Catherine just shout to the Tilneys and be like,
I'm being carried off against my will.
Exactly. Thorpe is taking me away. I guess you can't do that. But,
it would be improper. Be rude, I guess.
So I made a mistake. So this is the point, not chapter 9. This is the other foreshadowing point where John is talking about James. So, after James says, "Hey, it's getting late, man. We need to turn back." John is very upset. And he's like, "Oh, if Moreland had a better horse, we could have made it. My horse would have made it." He says, Moreland's a fool for not keeping a horse and gig of his own. And Catherine says, well, he can't afford it. And John says, which is great. John is really walking through the logic here. He says, well, why can't he afford it?
Whose fault is that?
Because he doesn't have enough money? I don't know what other interpretation of he can't afford it you could come up with. But John needs it spelled out. And then he says, well, whose fault is that? And she says, well, nobody's that I know of. But then Thorpe says something about it being a damned thing to be miserly, and that if people who rolled in money could not afford things, he didn't know who could. Which I love, which Catherine did not even endeavor to understand. Catherine, he's not obfuscating here. He's not being slick. He's out and out saying that he thinks you guys have money, and you're not picking up on that. So I'm a little disappointed in old Catherine as our heroine here.
Maybe she just gave an eye roll and looked away.
Perhaps.
That would be my reaction. She just wants to get out of the gig safely and back home.
Exactly. She's just trying to get out of this situation at this point. Because she just gets back, and she's really distraught, which I don't blame her. It's kind of PTSD. You just got kidnapped.
Yeah, she's got kidnapped. She didn't get to see the castle, so she gave up one thing for something that she thought she might like, because she knew she would like going to this castle. Then she didn't even get to see that. The whole day is ruined, and Jane Austen breaks the wall and says, and now I dismiss my heroine to the sleepless couch.
Yeah, she's upset over this.
Yeah.
Which I can't blame her. Because, you think about, how these people spend their days, right? There's not a whole lot of excitement. Like they go for a walk and they, they talk to people at the pump room. Like that's the height, they play cards. That's like the height of their excitement. So, being kidnapped to the point of, agitation, this is probably the highest her heart rate has been in, maybe her life.
Yeah. I think this is probably one of the most, I would never, if I were her, I would never be with John Thorpe ever again. Ever.
No, certainly not.
Terrifying.
Unfortunately, I think the pressures of civility and good society are going to prevent that, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. All right, so chapter 12.
We've got a special guest analyst for chapter 12. So we'll see how much she contributes to the conversation.
All right, so chapter 12. Kat.
Yes, go ahead.
Kat is so distraught that she demands in her mind, she's demanding that she goes call on Miss Tilney. She asks Mrs. Allen, do you think there'd be any harm in calling on her today to explain everything? Right? Mrs.
She continues to rely on Mrs. Allen's opinions.
Why do you keep asking Miss Allen? By all means, dear, go, but, wear white. Miss Tilney always wears white. What?
Miss Tilney always wears white.
But
I think she's seen her like once, maybe twice.
For all she knows, Miss Tilney's dead. She doesn't know.
She doesn't know.
But Catherine cheerfully complied. Like, your friend comes to visit you wearing exactly what you wear? Like, that's creepy, Mrs. Allen. Why would why would you do that? So she goes to Milsom Street, which is where the Tilneys are staying. It's their pump house, their shore house, their bath house for the time being that they're there. And the servant, the butler.
Well, I like here how she doesn't know where they live, so the first thing she does is go to the pump room to figure it out. Like, I guess you have listed your address and everything in this pump room book, so everyone can find you.
Interesting. Okay, that's kind of weird. Although, like with the internet, you can find anyone quick. Ben's so good at it. He's like, we have new neighbors. I know where they... Well, we know where they live, but he's like, I know where they work, how long they've worked there, where they worked before.
Oh, my goodness.
Which is kind of creepy, but
the amount of privacy we've given up in the modern age, we just...
Oh, yeah. So she finds them at Milsom Street. She asks the doorman if Miss Tilney's in. And he's like, maybe. I don't know. Give me your card. I'll go up. And he comes back and he's like, yeah, no. She's actually not here. And Catherine's like, I don't really believe him, but okay. She sensed it. She looks back. She's not at the window. She comes back and she's gone, right?
She looks back a couple times. Well, as she's walking away, she's checking the windows.
Yeah.
And then she gets to the end of the street. She's like, you know what? I'm going to look back one more time. And then she sees Miss Tilney walking out. What is Miss Tilney's name anyway?
Eleanor.
I thought it started with an E.
Mm-hmm.
So she, right before she leaves the street, she turns around and is like, oh, there she is walking out.
With her dad, with General Tilney.
Right.
And Kat is devastated. I would be too.
She is. It's kind of rude, isn't it? Like, you sent your card up.
Yeah. You
said, hey, I'm here.
She's... And nobody even comes out for a minute to say, we're stepping out or whatever. I would be devastated too if a friend said, I'll be there. Or, well, I guess she didn't say she'll be there, but if she is there, I go see, and then she leaves without telling me and makes somebody lie for her, I wouldn't like that at all. But
right. This just really shows the amount of hurt that, hey, we're going to come pick you up tomorrow to go for a walk. And then you see them driving away. They're offended. This is, she's angry at her.
Well, I was thinking how difficult it is to communicate in that age, because how long do you wait on a muddy day to go for a walk? Were you expected to wait all day long in case they came? She did wait an hour, right?
I guess once you've said something that stands, until it changes. So if they said, hey, we're going to go for a walk today, like, that's what you're doing today. Like, you don't have any other plans. You better not make any other plans.
Weird that she just has to sit around. It's raining. But if it stops, plans are still on. Like,
and I mean, they have doormen and footmen, and you think they could send somebody over to say, oh, Miss Tilney sends her regrets, you know.
True. I guess that's what you're technically waiting for. And if that doesn't come, then plans are still on.
Yeah, in absence of any other information.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed. Yeah.
So then we get to the theater, our next theater vignette, so to speak.
Right.
And she doesn't at first see any of the Tilneys, and then Henry shows up like halfway through the play. I assume it's a 4-act play. He shows up with 2 acts left.
Right.
Sitting with his dad. And she gets to explain herself.
I was very angry because I was disappointed that the tension was diffused so rapidly and easily in this chapter. She goes to the theater. She sees Tilney. Tilney's mad at her. He's kind of cold towards her. And she says, hey, I wanted to go, but this is what happened. And then Tilney's like, oh, cool. You actually wanted to go with us? Oh, all right. You know, and then everything's fine.
Yeah, he doesn't chastise her for not waiting. I think that's a good response. You don't like it? You thought it was too neatly resolved?
I thought it was very quick. It was, you know, it said, Mr. Tilney, I've been quite wild to speak with you and make my apologies. You know, I had 10,000 times rather been with you. Now, had I not, Miss Allen? Miss Allen says, my dear, you tumble my gown, was Miss Allen's reply. Like,
I love that.
What does that even mean? You tumble my gown. Like, is that like, don't drag me into this? Like,
maybe she bowled her over with all of these, like...
Yeah, because she says, her assurance, however, standing sole as it did, was not thrown away. So Miss Allen's, you tumble my gown, did not lend any support to the fact that she would have rather hang out with the Tilneys.
Right. I picture my visualization is somebody literally running someone over with all of these questions or desires for her to back her up, and then she tumbles and all the skirts go flying.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, so then, you know, she says, if only Thorpe would have stopped, I would have jumped out and run after you.
Well, I bet the Tilneys could also see her distress from where they were. Like, she's looking back and forth and she's calling. I bet it wasn't a total surprise.
Right. And I think Tilney has a good read on Thorpe anyway, so.
I hope so. I don't think he likes Thorpe very much. I wouldn't.
Right, anyway. No. I would be very surprised if he were. So they make their apologies, and so now, at the end of this chapter, she spies Thorpe talking to General Tilney, and she's not quite sure what's going on. And I'm not sure what's going on here either, so I'm curious what your thoughts are on...
She's rightfully skeptical of... I mean, I think she's rightfully skeptical of what's happening.
Right.
But...
Thorpe comes over and talks to her, and he says, General Tilney, he's talking about General Tilney here. He's a fine old fellow, stout and active, looks as young as his son. I have great regard for him.
When she wonders, like, how do you know him? And he's like, well, there's not anybody in Bath that I don't know. What do you mean, how do I know him?
I know everybody. We played billiards. We're friends now. So then we find out that General Tilney thinks Catherine the finest girl in Bath, which I find pretty creepy, honestly, because it's not like Catherine has great personality or has interacted with General Tilney much. Basically, General Tilney, who's this older guy, is just like, yeah, Catherine, she's pretty hot. I'm digging her. Because that's literally all he knows of her, right? Or I guess the little bit that his son has told him.
Well, that's what he means by fine. She's the finest girl in all of Bath.
Exactly. Oh, she's fine, all right.
How old is she again? 17? I think.
I think she's 19, isn't she? Isn't she 19?
She's still a teen, regardless. She's not even in her 20s yet.
No. I think she's 19. I think we established at the outset that she's 19. Okay, so that takes us to chapter 13. I don't have a ton on this one.
Oh, I love this chapter. No, this is a great chapter.
You
13?
love this one?
Yeah. I mean, I love it because I hate it. Because Catherine Catherine makes a new date to walk with Miss Tilney.
Right.
They're going to walk on Tuesday, right? On Monday. They're going to walk on Monday. The other three do their thing again, and they show up, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to go do that thing again. Let's take the drive and do the things we were supposed to do. Go to the castle." And she's like, "No, I'm not doing it this time."
They're super rude about it too.
Oh my God, they're terrible. They try all these Isabella especially tries all these manipulation techniques, flattery, and then she's mean to her. She what's that word? Remonstrances. Oh, I can't say it, but. They implore her to break the date and just move it to Tuesday, which they think is just a simple thing, and take the drive to Clifton.
Right.
And Catherine's not having it. She will not break the date.
Oh yes, this is the chapter that gets very high school, very middle school even.
And this time, I think Kat's starting to grow a little bit because she sees through Isabella.
Right, and this is where, Thorpe, says, "Oh, I'm only going to go because I want to drive you." I don't, she's like, "Take your sisters, man. You got two other sisters. You can drive them. You don't need me to come along." Because I guess it's weird if he goes by himself or something. And this is just the most bizarre window into personal relations in this day. Thorpe runs over and basically tells the Tilneys, "Hey, it's cool. Catherine forgot she was coming with us, so she's going to go with you guys tomorrow." And, when he comes back and says, "Oh, hey, I straightened it all out. You can come ride with us and go walking with them tomorrow." I think you're right. A little bit of growth. Catherine's not having it. She then runs back over and says, No. He spoke out of turn. I'm coming with you. Which I just imagined this happening, in a middle school playground.
Well, and the other two don't even care. Her brother's like, "Quit being so disagreeable." And then when John does this crappy thing, they're like, "Oh, great, that's settled then. Wonderful." Isabella's countenance changes. She's all happy. It's absurd. I was so furious for Catherine.
Yes, because I'm just, as a modern reader, had this happened in real life, you're not going to have a good time. Catherine's not going to enjoy herself. It's not going to be a pleasant, having her along on your drive is probably going to ruin the mood of the group. It's the most bizarre thing, looking at it 200 years later.
I think Catherine thinks it's bizarre. I don't know why the other two are okay with it.
They're terrible people.
I guess I'm on Kat's side. I don't want to dislike her brother, but her brother's clearly only cares about himself and getting the chance to go out with Isabella. And this is his chance. Right. They can't go by themselves. And John won't go by himself and doesn't want to take his sister. Kat had the best plan. She was like, "Why don't we do our thing on Tuesday? Since you guys think it's so easy to just move plans a day, let's just do it the next day." And they're like, "No.
No.
Can't do that.
We're going today." It's just the most bizarre thing. Just go do something else today. You're in Bath, for crying out loud.
And Catherine, who's in the right the whole time, she's like, I just think my choice is right, and I'm not going to move. And everyone's like, "Oh, you're being so obstinate." And she's like, she's hurt because her brother thinks that she's being a jerk, and she doesn't want him to think ill of her. But she's just like, "Nope, I just really think that this is the right thing." And then her taking off, I picture her sprinting down the street, and she just blows past the footman at the door and just bursts into the first room in their house. She just runs into their house, takes the first door on the right or whatever, and sees them. This has
to be a scandalous, desperate gesture in these days.
I think can you imagine even, one of your friends just busts in the house and runs up to your bedroom and is like, "Hey, I had to tell you something."
This is true. Fortunately, I don't have friends, so that I kind of keep that at bay. But yeah, she just shows up in the drawing room or whatever, and where they're kind of hanging out.
Breathlessly explains herself, and freaking General Tilney. He's like, "What do you think do you think our doorman meant by it, letting you in?
Yeah.
What's his name?
He's going to get it.
Yeah. What's his name? William. Wallace? William.
What did William mean by it?
Just,
yeah.
She's like, no,
poor
I busted
William's
by
going to get it. Yeah. It's like, please don't punish the servant, sir.
This is my fault. And then it's all explained, and they're like, we did think it was odd. Why would they take John Thorpe's? They must not know him. Why would they take his? Or maybe they think,
right?
Maybe they're trying to figure Catherine out. They're like, man, she runs with a questionable crowd. This John Thorpe,
right? If she digs Thorpe, yeah.
Ugh.
Well, anyway, they hang out for a little bit, and they say, why don't you just hang out with us all day and come have dinner with us and stuff? So she's got her social calendar filled up.
Well, and she remembers the fact that John told her General Tilney really likes her. And she thinks, well, maybe John's not so bad after all. Maybe he has his good qualities. No, girl, stop it. Stop letting yourself think that. Because he sort of kind of did one nice thing. Maybe, except really from our perspective, it's a creepy thing. We're all creeping on her.
And it's probably self-serving because he was trying to attach himself to General Tilney with the whole, oh, yeah, I know that guy. We play billiards. And, he went up and talked to him after the theater the other night. And so, if General Tilney has a good opinion of Catherine and he's trying to attach himself to General Tilney, then, he's got something else cooking up his sleeve there.
Yeah. And then the final part of this chapter, which is kind of like some kind of icing on the cake here, she hears from Mr. Allen that had she gone on this trip, riding about in open-air carriages, young men and women together, he does think it's quite improper. And she's like, oh, what? Are you serious? Mrs. Allen, why didn't you tell me? She's like, oh, well...
Yeah, I think we know why Mrs. Allen didn't tell her.
I wonder what goes on in Mrs. Allen's brain. I just think of like a slideshow of
I don't
dress,
think much of anything.
Gown, dinner, dress, gown, dinner.
That's about it. That's about it.
So then she's all worried for Isabella. Do you think Isabella knows that it's wrong? And I don't know if it's technically wrong or Mr. Allen is just a prude or more conservative than others, but
he may be. I mean, he has no children, so I think as if any of our listeners don't have children, or the ones who do, you always find out that the best parents in the world are the people with no children. So Mr. Allen may have very set and fixed opinions on how young people should act without having any children of his own.
It's so easy to parent your children when they don't exist and they're not screaming at you and crying that they can't have screen time for 50 more minutes.
Precisely. Oh. Well, that takes us to the end of this week's chapters. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to getting into the next bit here and seeing what's going on with, I think we've got some schemes of the Thorpes working, money related.
Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering if Isabella is going to drop James once she figures out that he really isn't as rich as John believes he to be. That's one of my things I'm looking out for.
I wonder why John thinks this so much. He spends a lot of time with James. They're like roommates at college.
They're schoolmates. Yeah, exactly.
Wouldn't he
they
know?
hang out at Oxford together.
Maybe they all put on a good show for each other.
Is Oxford paid for? Do you have to pay to go to Oxford in these days? I don't even know.
No idea.
Or is it just when you're accepted, it's taken care of? I don't know.
Historian listeners out there, let us know.
The Morelands have to have some amount of money, because remember he gave
her like
Catherine,
$10,000, right?
Right, yeah, like £100, or I forget how much it was, but yeah, he gave her some spending money in Bath, so he gave her a bit of money.
Yeah.
So they're not destitute, obviously.
No. But I find the Thorpes to be maybe conniving is too strong, but I still feel like that fits. I find them to be disingenuous at best.
Oh, definitely. I think John's got something working. He's got some schemes going.
Do you think he and Isabella are in it together?
You know, I wouldn't have said so before chapter 13, I don't think. But I think like you said, when Catherine was like, hey, why don't we just take the drive on Tuesday? And everybody was like, oh, no, it has to be today for some reason. Maybe they are working it together. I don't know.
Yeah. They're terrible friends. This is a good lesson in who not to be friends with.
Everyone.
All right.
All right. So this was Classic Slept Through. This was episode 20. We're just rolling along.
Yeah.
So, if you like what we're doing here, folks, why don't you give us a rating, like us on Apple Podcasts, and tell your friends, spread the word, right? We have literature, spread the good word of literature. Share a book with a friend, and then, you've got a mini book club starting already. And you all can discuss Northanger Abbey.
Preach, brother.
I'm trying. But you can hit us up on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at CYSTpod. You can send us an email, cystpod@gmail.com. So until next time, this has been Classics You Slept Through. Make sure you finish your homework before third period.